Okay, this video is for those picking the animation project, the alternate one, where you're creating an animation reel. So there are some really neat tools, some really cool stuff out there. Depending on your technical competency, it may adjust on how you want to approach this final. Okay, now this week, our assignment is basically taking the final we want to make, assessing it, looking at it, pulling from our own skill set, seeing what we need, what we know, what we don't know, what we need, how to get it done, and how to make a plan to get this done in 2 weeks' time. Now, in a lot of ways, this assignment could be easier than the other one because there might be less modeling. In other ways, it's more difficult because, of course, it's probably more animation than the other assignment. Again, if the people are doing the other one right, then they're thinking like a film editor and trying to cut corners whenever possible. For this project, it's a little bit less so, right? Because these animations will be used in a game. Now, my first piece of advice, I think I probably already mentioned this, but most of your animations will have the same starting pose and ending pose. This is really helpful. Now, there are tools inside of, say, Unity or inside of Unreal where you can kind of buffer and transition animations from one to another. There's some really cool tools in there. And again, they do things like seamlessly go from one animation to another and look at kind of the position of the arms and hands and that sort of thing. If the animations are kind of made to fit together, this usually works a little bit better than if they're not. Now, if your animations tend to, again, start and end with the same pose and they look too, obvious, starting and ending the same, you may need to tweak it a bit. That's only going to be really, noticeable once you've got the animations kind of done and you bring them into the engine and you start working with them. Okay, for the final, I really would like to see these animation sets presented in a game engine. Okay, I understand that technically speaking, that may be kind of challenging for some, but that's really going to be our goal for this project. It's going to be to create an animation set of a full animation, major animations that you would need for a particular character or model, and bring that into a game engine. Now, it's a lot I'm asking, I know, but we have 2 weeks, plenty of time to really get it done, depending on the complexity of your animations, okay? Now, I will say this. One of the hardest parts about this class is all of our animations are different, so there really isn't like a one-size-fits-all requirement, right? I can tell you, make 25 animations. Still, 25 animations that are trying to recreate a modified, complex type of jujitsu might be really tough. 25 animations of, somebody making coffee as a barista for a game might be less so. It's all over the place. So I will say, think about your character and think about how to present it. Think what kind of games you want to make, what kind of things you want to work on. Remember all of those when you're working on this project. While most people probably pick like a major character, maybe you would want to pick an NPC or somebody else in your game. Again, I mentioned offhandedly, like if your character were a barista, animating them using the cappuccino machine, etc. While that may seem not as glamorous as creating a custom animation for an oversized Final Fantasy style sword, it in some ways might be a better portfolio piece because less people know how to animate somebody working a cappuccino machine. Just kind of something to keep in mind. The truth is, it's your project. Make something that excites you, that you really want to work on. That's going to push you to make it the best as possible. So again, my first bit of advice is for many of your animations, you're probably going to start and end in the exact same pose. In 3ds Max, it's very easy. You can use the main timeline at the bottom and literally just select the parts and grab the key and hold. I want to say it's like Control, I think, Control or Alt. I think it's Control, and shift, and drag it to another spot, and it'll just clone those. You can also use the little key tool at the bottom, or even go into like the dope sheet and copy and paste the keys. I would say before you do any of the animations, once you have that character's base pose, I would go through what it would be your entire animation sequence, and I'd put like frame 5 to 20 for idle would be that pose, those keys. So you only have to animate the middle. Then maybe frames 25 to 45 is, you know, walk, or maybe, whatever, walking animation, starting with that pose and ending with it. If it makes sense, again, if the walking animation doesn't make sense to start and end with that pose, then obviously don't make it next. Group them, right? On games, a lot of projects I've worked on, some examples would be, I worked on a game where the character dies and then, has a death animation and falls to the ground. The lying animation for that game was used for both the death and knocking down animations, and even really like sleeping type animations, although there really wasn't sleeping in this game. But because of that, it could just kind of be reused, right? There were some animations like getting up from the lying down pose to standing, actually animated starting with the ending pose and then, with the laying down pose, and then animating to the initial stance pose. That was the animation clip, though. Again, obviously it wouldn't be the same because the starting point was laying on the ground pose, and the ending point was the default animation. That would be only used in a certain spot in the game, right, where it needed somebody to get up. The same thing in reverse was true. It would be going from getting hit to falling down, or from standing to falling down, depending if you needed both. If you got hit, again, the falling down from getting hit animation would be one, but also the getting hit and then going back to the standing pose might be one. How you break down your animations is going to be different depending on what game you're trying to make, what game engine you're working with, and what kind of pieces you're trying to do. Unfortunately for this project, you might not have all of those answers. So, my advice to you really is to try your best. Okay, and I know that sounds like I'm phoning in. I'm not, I promise. But every game you work on is probably going to have a uniquely specific way of doing all of those pieces. So there's no real way to, know that ahead of time. So we want to practice on making the skills as versatile as possible for all future projects. So keep that in mind, okay? Like with the other project, we only have 2 weeks left, so don't get bogged down in the minute details. Make all the animations, get them done. Hopefully, if they're not as well as you'd like or as good as you'd like, you'll have time to go back and fix them. But try to get them done first. Do your best. Make them only as complicated as you feel comfortable doing. And don't be afraid to use tools. Just make sure that you document tools you're using. So if I'm pulling a motion capture walk cycle animation from mocapdata.com or some other place, and I'm wanting to use it as the base for my character's walking animation. Now I might modify that a little bit. Again, if I have that person holding that big sword, I might animate them like holding the sword like this. So even though the motion capture walk is a person walking with normal hands, I may delete all the keys for the one arm and put it like this instead. Maybe I'll use their walking cycle for the normal walk, but then I want a walk cycle holding the weapon. I want to go from that one to the ready animation. I might have an idle animation that only is used for unarmed or not in combat. That might go from that to the walking, to the running, to the jumping animation. I might start with the default biped. Again, there is a walking, running, and jumping preset. It'll auto-generate with the biped. It's rough, but it's a great place to start. Again, if you're unsure of how things like planted and sliding keys are working, generate a walk cycle using the pre-built biped settings. It's very easy. Just basically click it and generate it. Tell it how many footsteps you want to make it. And then it'll create it out. But then you can modify it. And it's very easy to modify that into something with a lot of personality. Okay, there are a couple of tools as well. I came across one a while back, and I've played with it a bit. And some of you might really enjoy it and some might not. And it's called Cascadeur. And basically it is a 3D animating software that's really just used for animations. And it uses some AI and different things to make it really easy to do. There's some really great tutorials and guides online. There are some examples. Basically, it's not for modeling. It's not for any of that stuff. It's just for animating. So you got to have your rigged character and bring it in. But once you bring in that rigged character, again, you can create the different animations and stuff. And there are some tools and utilities for converting those animations to like a biped or an Unreal skeleton and different things. It's really worth checking out. Again, it's spelled what is it? CASCADEUR. I've seen this software come a long way in the last year and a half. So it looks like it's become even more user-friendly. It has some really great motion tracking tools, and it's got some really good tools to make it easy to interpolate from different poses and stuff. It's got animation tracks. Basically, it's got all the tools, almost all the tools, or most of the tools that you would find in 3ds Max, but it's got some really cool ways it utilizes them in a unique way to try to really make good, nice-looking animations without a lot of work. Again, feel free to check it out. I'm putting some links in this week for it. If you want to use it, you can. If you don't want to learn another piece of software, I totally get that too. So for this assignment again this week, we want to figure out what we need for animation, make sure our character is rigged and ready to go, make sure we're ready to animate. Again, check out some of the motion capture stuff this week. If you're using biped or the cat model and utilizing it, it could be a really great tool for your animations. Again, if you're using animations that are brought in from Unreal, the Unreal skeleton, if you're bringing them in from a Unity file you bought, if you're bringing them in from mocapdata.com for your final, just document is all I ask, okay? Utilize any tool available. Just make sure that it's clearly marked kind of where the stuff came. And even if you've modified a motion capture walk cycle to be your own custom walk cycle, that's worth mentioning, right? That's a skill. Like, that's a pretty amazing one. And so while it may not feel as your own as starting from nothing and animating your walk cycle, it's still worth mentioning, presenting, talking about, and a skill that you would have, okay? For this animation set you might find, it's probably going to be a combination of a different tools and helpful things, plus your own hand animations. Generally speaking, most students haven't just went from the ground up, although a fair amount have. So if you are doing ground up animations all your own, absolutely that works too. We just want to document whenever we're being assisted and when we're not, especially as these tools continue to grow in complexity. Just keep in mind, what do you utilize, those kind of things, and make sure they're clearly marked. Again, I'm wanting you to utilize tools, whether it's a video that you used in 3ds Max to kind of help get all of your key poses off of. Again, super common for creating really complex animations. A game I was working on, I wanted to redo the animation cycle for. This game was based off Dark Sun, which is a D&D campaign, and the halflings in it, they're like hobbits, like small people, were kind of feral and cannibalistic. And so I replaced the running animation from normal to running on all fours. I just seen, and it's going to date it, but I just seen the movie Split, and I saw the character running through the yard on all fours like an animal, and it was beautiful. It was amazing. It was so elegant and twisted and wrong and creepy. And so I literally found the animation of kind of somebody pretending to be like a cat and run like a cat, like run on the all fours. And I found a really great video reference for that. And I literally just took the poses straight from that, the key poses, and created my running cycle. And it's fantastic. Like, it completely changed playing that character, because that unique element of being the only, playable character or thing in the game that uses that animation. I had a bunch of people testing it right after that said they just spent that night running around the world because they were getting so much joy out of that awkward, on all fours kind of running animation. And of course, we coupled that with changing our base pose to something a little bit more crouched down and a little more feral. So that way, when it transitioned to the running pose, because again, even this in this older game engine would do that, would transition for you. It went smoother and kind of looked a little better. When it was going from the full standing one to the down on the ground, it kind of it was too fast. It's like like spring out, you know. But having kind of that in between made it really feel nice and was super fun. So, you know, again, you know, when you're working on this, I can't wait to see what you come up with. I'm very excited for this project. I'm very excited to see what the animations you have planned are. I'm very excited to see how they turn out. This video is getting super long. Good luck, and I can't wait to see your plan for the next couple of weeks.